Oh, good morning, Sunday, week 9 of the NFL season. Football Diehards Sunday DFS show with the popular and talented Jason Brady and myself, the old man of fantasy, Emil Kadlec. Brady, how's it going this Sunday?
It's going pretty good here. Can't wait to get into it. Had a pretty good week last week. It seemed like a lot of the chalk busted. I was able to cash with a couple injured players in my lineup, so would have had a monster week if Jimmy
Whoa.
Garoppolo didn't get hurt. But he got hurt regardless, and hopefully a really good week this week.
Wow, fantastic. All right, let's start with the quarterbacks.
All right, starting with the quarterbacks here, Russell Wilson up top, 7,600 versus Buffalo. You really can't go wrong with Russell Wilson here. 55-point game total, which is the highest on the slate. The Seahawks are 3-point favorites. And Wilson has been putting up some insane numbers this year, averaging 32 DraftKings points per week. Really solid matchup here in a game that's projected to score high. Great stackable options with DK Metcalf and someone we'll talk about. Tyler Lockett I really like here. And just a huge ceiling for Wilson. And you're always getting that ceiling every single week here. So I think if you want to pay up for a quarterback, Wilson's definitely an option on the highest projected total on the slate.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the number one owned quarterback, surprise, surprise. But 12.4%, not horribly high, but I guess quarterbacks you have a good distribution. So yeah, he's pretty high up.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
personally,
you,
he's not my
you think
favorite option, but what'd you say?
he's not your favorite option?
He's not my favorite option. There's somebody else to talk about, but that ownership,
Cool.
it's a little bit high for quarterbacks, but he has that upside, so you definitely can understand why.
Sounds good.
All right, getting to the next play here, Deshawn Watson, 7,100 versus Jacksonville. You're getting a nice savings off of the top guys like Russell Wilson. 50-point game total here. The Texans are 7-point favorites. He is averaging 24.5 DraftKings points, and he started off the season really slow, but he was playing some tough matchups at Kansas City, Pittsburgh. But he's been great as of late. Fantastic matchup here against Jacksonville. He's had at least 300 yards in the last 4 weeks as well. I think he had like 30 DraftKings points last time they played Jacksonville this year. So great stackable options. Will Fuller, Cooks is someone that we'll talk about. So Deshaun Watson at 7,100. I like him in tournaments. I think he's a good cash play as well.
Yeah, he is the third highest owned quarterback at just 9.9%. But yeah, he's had some 300-yard games in a row. It's scary to watch him. He's kind of, I don't know. You watch the first part of the game and you're thinking, I don't know if this guy's going to do it. By the time the game's over, he's got 300 yards in a solid fantasy game. So,
Yep.
he's a good one, that's for sure. Good matchup with Jacksonville. Poor Jacksonville.
I know. All right, so this is probably my favorite tournament option, and I'm guessing it's the second highest owned quarterback this slate here, and it's Josh Allen, 7,000, 55-point game total here. The Seahawks are 3-point favorites, and he started off the year hot, but he has slowed down as of late. And you really can't ask for a better matchup here against Seattle. Seattle has given up the most DraftKings points to quarterbacks so far. Great stackable options. Stephon Diggs is my favorite one there. You got Cole Beasley, John Brown, and there's some other good ones there. And Josh Allen should definitely bounce back here. Seattle is ranked 32 versus the quarterbacks. So this is a good matchup to come back here. I like the price at 7,000. You're getting a nice discount off of the top guys. And I think there's a ton of upside here and a 55-point game total.
Yeah, he's the second most owned quarterback, 10.26%. He was so good at the beginning of the year. I'm getting a little scared. I'm not sure what to think. The team's a winning team. He's playing better. But, Seattle does give up the points. They're at home. I like it, too. He's just I guess I'm just a little nervous about it. But sometimes, you got to go with what you got to go.
Yeah, it's weird because he was getting people were calling him the MVP, the first couple weeks, but
It was incredible.
he's definitely slowed down.
Well, he was fumbling the ball too. That didn't help. I didn't like that. He's taking some chances or trying to push the envelope, but he has definitely improved, and this is a good matchup. So hopefully he can bounce back because he's had some rough times fantasy wise, even though they're winning. So.
Yep. Well, this is the matchup to do it. So hopefully he can.
Cool.
All right, so next, going a little bit down, we have Matthew Stafford at 6,600. So, earlier in the week, we thought he might not play, But now I guess he's expected to play here. And I actually like him in this matchup quite a bit against the Vikings here. 51-point game total. He is averaging 19.8 DraftKings points. And a great matchup here against one of the worst, if not the worst, passing defense in Minnesota. The thing is, they are missing Kenny Golladay, which I think could hurt a little bit. But they still have Jones, Amendola, and Hall, which are decent stackable options. And we'll talk about them. But solid upside here and a really softball matchup. And I wish it was a little bit cheaper. I mean, 6,600 is not bad. I still think he's going to do good today, but I'd rather go up and get to Josh Allen's. But such a great matchup here for Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, 6,600. You know, he was on the COVID. He got off the COVID, and I think everybody passed this morning, so he's clear from how I understand it. 4.2% owned. That's nice for GPP. 6,600. I can't remember what he was before, but I was kind of hoping to be a little lower than that. But definitely a good matchup with Minnesota at Minnesota. Hopefully we'll have a blowout there.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely a good option. A little bit riskier because I think Golladay, not having Golladay, I think could hurt him a little bit.
Yeah, that's going to hurt. You know, we'll see how the other guys too. We'll talk when we get to receivers. We'll chit chat about that, but that is a bit of a concern. Maybe they can throw a little bit more to the running backs to offset that issue. And of course, the tight end has been doing better too. But we'll talk about that later. So yeah, not a bad one there.
All right, so finally here, if you want to punt quarterback play, I actually like Drew Lock versus Atlanta here, 5,200, 50-point game total. The Broncos are 3.5 favorites. He's only averaging 10.8 DraftKings points per week, but a really great matchup here against Atlanta, who has one of the worst pass defenses in the league, one of the worst defenses in the league in general. He did score 20.8 DraftKings points last week versus the Chargers, just a punt quarterback here with a cheap price. And should have a decent amount of upside against this Atlanta defense that typically is really bad against quarterbacks here. So if you do want to save some money at quarterback, I think Drew Lock at 5,200 is not a bad option.
Yeah, 4.3% owned. He's actually owned more than Stafford, but that may change this morning. Because Stafford was on COVID-9 earlier in the week. He's an interesting guy. It's kind of scary, obviously. Had a really weird game last week, but then ended up with the good points as you talked about. The team has been talking the last week or so. They were kind of mad about the mistakes they're making and where they're going, and I really feel that they're focusing on getting better. He's he's just a little out there right now. Still a young quarterback, but that's a good one. 5,200, 4.3% owned at Atlanta. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. I like that as a risky play.
Yes. Yeah, I really like the matchup. I really like attacking this Atlanta defense.
Excellent. Now that'll be a fun one.
Yes. All right, we're going to move into the running backs now, and up top, he's finally back, and that is Christian McCaffrey versus Kansas City here, 8,500, and it's weird because we saw him at 10,000 to open up the year. We saw him at 10,000 in week 2, so getting a nice discount here on McCaffrey and a 52.5-point game total where the Panthers are 10-point underdogs. He has that elite pass-catching ability and a game here that should score high, insane floor, and insane ceiling. I'm curious to see how much usage McCaffrey is going to get in his first game back from injury. But still, this is the cheapest we're going to see him for the rest of the year. After this week, if he does well, we're not going to see him at 8,500. So I kind of want to take advantage here. I really like McCaffrey this week. And, should be most likely coming from behind in a game they're going to be trailing, where it's going to lead to more passing attempts, more receptions, which adds up in DFS here. So McCaffrey, probably one of my favorite plays. I'm curious to hear the ownership. Hopefully he's not too popular, but I'm assuming he does have some ownership with him.
Right now it's at 7% as of this morning, Sunday morning, which is, pretty low, actually.
Yes.
I think people are worried. I think people are a little worried about how many touches he's going to get, how they'll put this guy out there. But I think they've waited long enough. I think they were patient about it. And, I totally agree. Thank you. You're absolutely right about this. Whatever he does, if he does poorly, but if he shows that he's ready to go, his price is going to go up next week and the weeks after, unless something weird happens. So really, this is your opportunity to use this guy, and at 7% owned, at 8,500 salary, well, that's a real tempting thing to do in week 9. and use him before his price goes up.
Yeah, and another thing, use him before the ownership goes up, because if he does well, he's not going to be 8% next week.
No, he's going to be back up at the top, you would think, or damn close to the top.
Yeah.
I mean, look what happened with Alvin Cook last week. A different situation. Cook was out like a week or two, and obviously Christian was out a lot more. But what happened to Cook? Same thing. He had low ownership. Everybody was worried, and he had a monster game. Now, it was a situation where you can't expect. I mean, that was a monster game by Cook. But that's the same situation in decisions for your DFS lineups.
Yeah, for sure. And, speaking of Cook, we're going to talk about it here now, but we talked about Cook last week. We talked about getting off of some of the Henry and Kamara ownership. I did that in single entry, and it worked out fantastic. The dude scored 51.6 DraftKings points. He went off, I think he had like 3 or 4 touchdowns. But in this game versus Detroit, it's another great matchup. 52.5 point game total, where the Vikings are 4-point favorites, and it is one of the highest game totals on the slate. And Detroit is ranked 32nd versus running backs here. They have given the most points to running backs as well. Just tons of volume, a little bit of pass catching ability as well. And I don't know, I think a lot of people are going to go here. I think it's probably a must play in cash. I mean, the matchup is so good. He's going to get a ton of usage. I think he's a really safe play as well. In tournaments, I think he's going to be very high owned. If you want to pivot off to like a McCaffrey, lower ownership, but I'm going to have a decent amount of Cook at 8,200.
You and everybody else, he's pretty chalked out. The number one running back, 30.5% owned. So you're right. It's just the situation's great. A great week the week before in Week 8. Detroit at home. Great opportunity, and a lot of people are going to be putting him in their lineups. Put
30%.
30.5. He's done. The next guy is Jason Jacobs at 18.5. So there's this incredible, huge. He's way up there. He is definitely out there standing in chalk all by himself.
Understandable.
Sorry.
No, you're good. All right, moving on to next play here. James Robinson, 7,000 versus Houston in a 50-point game total, where the Jaguars are 7-point underdogs. And averaging 20.1 DraftKings points so far this year. A great matchup against this Houston defense in a game that should score high. He does have some pass-catching upside, catching 21 passes on the year. Pretty solid touchdown upside as well, has 6 touchdowns on the year. And the Jaguars should be coming from behind, leading to more pass catches. I think Robinson at 7,000 is not a bad look in tournaments.
Yeah, he's a very tempting guy this week. 9.5% owned. He's down there a little bit. And they got the new quarterback in. I guess it depends on how you feel about that. They're probably going to try and run more to help the young quarterback. But at the same time, if the quarterback, if they can't sustain drives, he may be in there, but they may not, sustain drives. So the amount of plays he gets, the amount of touches he gets, could be reduced. So you have to it's a double-edged sword that you're going to have to make decisions on. But it's a good situation because they're probably going to try and run the ball more than they typically do. 9.5% owned, not bad.
Yep, good point there. All right.
Not to be
so moving on. Yeah. So moving on to this next play, I'm curious to hear the ownership because I really like this play here, and it's James Conner 6,900. The problem here is it's a 43-point game total where the Steelers are 15-point favorites versus Dallas here, and averaging 17-point DraftKings points per game, 5 touchdowns on the year. I love the matchup against Dallas. I love attacking this Dallas defense that is pretty bad, and I love the game script play here for Conner. I mean, in a game that they should be ahead, they're going to be running the ball a ton here, so I think James Conner 6,900. I think he has touchdown opportunities, and I think he has a ton of touch opportunities this week as well in a game they should be ahead.
Yeah, he's the fourth most owned running back here, 14.5%. It's up there. You got to expect that. It's the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Cowboys played a little bit better last week on defense. However, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. It is at Dallas. And, this is one of those situations, like you said, if Pittsburgh gets up and Dallas can't move the ball, that means more offensive plays by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if they're ahead, like you said, Connors may get a lot of rushing. As situation. So another good opportunity there for DFS.
Yeah, I like it. All right. So getting into the next play here, and I'm also curious to hear the ownership of this guy, and it's Chase Edmund, 6,800. He got a 49-point game total here, where the Cardinals are 4.5 favorites here and averaging 12 DraftKings points per game, but of course a lot of that was with Kenyon Drake, and Kenyon Drake is not expected to play, giving Edmonds a lot of opportunity here. Solid pass catching upside. He had 7 targets last week, caught all 7 of them, and I love the matchup here versus Miami. And so 6,800, I think it's going to be fairly popular, but I do think it's a really good tournament play here.
Third owned running back, 18%. It's up there. Everybody's expecting this. I'm really looking forward to it. I want to see what this guy can do, and hopefully he can get enough touches, maybe 20 or more. I want to see what this guy can do, see if he can handle the rigor of being the number one running back this week. I don't know how long it's going to last, but this is a great opportunity for him. 20%. Miami's been an interesting defense, but let's see what he can do. He's, like you said, he's a multifaceted guy. It's running and catching, so he can adapt to the game, and they can adapt with him. So I'm excited about this, and I'm not too happy about the ownership, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I'm not happy about the ownership or the price. I wish he was priced down a little bit more, but if he was priced down, the ownership would be even higher there. So it's going to be an interesting play here.
Yes, definitely.
All right, so getting into this next play here, and DJ Dallas, 5,000 versus Buffalo. So Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde are both out here. So had a solid game last week. He had 23 total touches. I think we can expect around 20 touches this week again with Hyde and Carson out. Scored 22.8 DraftKings points last week as well, and it should have another big role here. Solid upside in a game that should score high. He did have 2 touchdowns last week as well. Just a nice cheap option at 5,000. Don't know how popular it would be, but I think this is a nice salary savings option down here at 5K.
Yeah, he's down at 6.4%, so he's moving down. He's not down because obviously what a great game, what a great salary he had last week. A great game and a great salary this week. Buffalo, at Buffalo, that just worries me a little, but he's the guy. He's the guy, and they've got a lot of other people to worry about. They got 2 great receivers, and they got a running quarterback. So perhaps they aren't going to be worried as much about Dallas. But yeah, that's a good one. He had a great week last week. So the whole question is Buffalo going to try and stop him, or are they going to try and stop some of the receivers? So I hope they're worried about the receivers in this situation.
I mean, they should be worried about the receivers, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, but you never know.
Yes, that's the fun of it all. We don't really know.
Yes. All right. So Justin Jackson, 4,900 versus the Raiders. I love the price here. 52.5 game total here. Chargers are 1-point underdogs. He did have 20 touches last week, so he was looking to be the number 1 running back on the Chargers, and we're getting him at 4,900. He has decent pass catching upside as well. Great matchup here against the poor Raiders run defense. I think they're they ranked 31st in the league in run defense, and a pretty solid upside here at a good price for Justin Jackson. I'm curious to hear the ownership about this one.
He's up there a little bit, 11.6%. I think people are seeing what you're seeing. They're playing against Las Vegas at home. He's whatever. 11.6. What do you think about that? Is that too high?
That is pretty high, especially for Justin Jackson here. So I don't know. I will have a little bit. I probably would rather go up and get Dallas for sure, especially if Dallas is going to be the lower owned guy. Definitely would probably get Dallas.
Yeah, Dallas is almost half the ownership at 6.4. Salaries are they're pretty darn close. 5,000 versus 4,900. So that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah. Okay, one last play I want to talk about, and this is if you really want to dumpster dive, if you really want to save some salary. Jordan Howard, 4,000 versus Arizona, and a 47.5 point game total, where the Dolphins are 4.5 point underdogs. Decent punt play here. Myles Gaskin is out for a couple of weeks, and I really liked Matt Breida at the beginning of the week, but I guess Matt Breida is ruled out as well, so Howard should be the next man up. And I'm not expecting anything crazy. but you really don't need much here at 4,000. Maybe he finds the end zone. The thing I don't like about Howard is he's not really a pass-catching running back, which sucks. If he was, then I'd probably be a little bit more interested. But just a pump play here at 4,000 and a pretty good matchup against Arizona.
Yeah, it's kind of scary to be talking about starting a guy who is, being inactive for several weeks. But wow, his ownership is 1.8%, which is really low. And Patrick Laird, he's also going to be playing this week. He's almost identical. His is 1.7 also, and his salary is 4,000. So I don't know if you would consider him or not. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Laird's another option I was looking at because he can actually catch the ball. It's just hard to tell who's going to be used more. Is it going to be Jordan Howard or is it going to be Laird? I think they're going to be using Howard more in the run game and Laird more as like the third down pass catching back. But you really never know here.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting situation to really think about because it's, what did you say, dumpster dive? I think that's a pretty good situation. Yep. But that's kind of the things we need to analyze when we're looking at GPP is guys like this who you just say, you got to be kidding me. But they're the guys this week, and you've got a new quarterback who's going to need some support at the running game. So these are guys you got to consider, even though you want to call them dumpster dives, but one of these guys may end up getting you 15 points or so, and really helping your team out.
That's true. Yep.
Is that it for running backs?
That is it for running backs. Was there anybody you wanted to throw out?
Let me get back to this question that involves running backs. All right. He needs to start, it looks like one. Jonathan Taylor, Mooney, or Edmund Sanders in a PPR. Or Ernest Sanders, I assume he means. Emmanuel Sanders, guess. Sorry. He's abbreviating, and I'm not smart enough to figure it out. So, Jonathan Stewart, Mooney for Chicago, or Emmanuel Sanders for New Orleans. What do you think?
So, Thomas is coming back, so I'd probably rule out Sanders there. You said Jonathan Taylor?
Yeah, for Indianapolis, who, didn't have a great game last week, but probably still considered the number one running back.
I think, weirdly, I'd probably go Mooney there. Jonathan Taylor has a bad matchup against Baltimore. He hasn't been really all that effective. He's been really splitting carries. I'd probably go Mooney.
Sounds good. Yeah, what an interesting guy Mooney has been as a rookie. He's a really fast player.
Yeah.
All right, are we ready to go to wide receivers?
Yes, we are. Here we go.
Beautiful.
All right, so we have Stephon Diggs, 7,400 up top. Of course, if you can go up and pay for DeAndre Hopkins, I think it's a very good play. But Stephon Diggs, 7,400 versus Seattle, 55-point game total, which is the highest on the slate, where the Bills are 3-point underdogs. High upside here with Stephon Diggs, averaging 18.8 DraftKings points. Great matchup here versus Seattle, who has given up the most points to opposing wide receivers thus far. And I'm really liking the Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs stack this week. 44 targets in the last 4 games for Diggs as well. And I said it before, you can't ask for a better matchup here against Seattle's here. So I'm really liking the Diggs stack. I'll have a decent amount of Diggs at 7,400.
And Diggs is the number one owned wide receiver in DFS this week, 19.5%. It could be higher than that. That's still, but it's a favorable situation. Everything you said is right there. So, yeah, I'm not surprised he's that highly owned. He's the number one target right now. It's working.
Yeah, a lot of people are seeing what I'm seeing. That Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs stack. I'm liking it this week. But yeah, it's going to be pretty high.
Josh Allen, I think, was questionable early, and right now the status is that he will play. It's already been called out by somebody, I forget who. So that's a good sign for that stack.
Yes. All right, so getting into the next play here, and I'm really curious to hear the ownership of this one because I think this could be, in a kind of a sneaky play. I think it'll be a little bit lower owned than a Diggs or a Keenan Allen here, but Julio Jones, 7,200 versus Denver, and a 50-point game total where the Falcons are 4-point favorites. And Julio is averaging 19.5 DraftKings points per game, 29 targets in the last 3 games. Matt Ryan has been targeting him a ton as of late, and he scored 77 DraftKings points in the last 3 weeks as well. So he's been going off as of late here. And Calvin Ridley is not expected to play. I think they said they're going to test him out, but they're not too optimistic that he is going to play there. And I love the price here of Julio Jones, especially if Ridley's out. I think Julio's going to get a lot of opportunities. And even when Ridley's playing, Julio still, does what he does. And 7,200, I think, is a little bit too cheap for Julio. But I'm curious to hear the ownership. Hopefully it's a little bit lower.
12.5% owned. He's the fifth owned wide receiver in DFS. So I don't know. How does that sound to you?
It's not awful. It's not awful. At least it's not like number 2 or something like that. I'll take it.
So, do you think Russell Gage is a viable player if Ridley goes out, or is there anybody else on the team that you think may be able to get some extra targets this week?
Yeah, I think you could look at Gage. That's probably the only one I'd probably trust there. Maybe Hayden Hurst helps him a little bit, a cheap tight end there. But yeah, Gage at 4,500 could be another option.
Yeah. I'm not so sure. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Excellent.
All right. So getting into the next play here, and this is more of a cash play for me, and it's probably going to be high owned as well in tournaments, so I'm probably really not going to go there. It's Keenan Allen versus the Raiders in a 53-point game total where the Chargers are a point favorite. And Allen's been fantastic this year, averaging 18.7 DraftKings points, averaging a little bit over 10 targets as well. And that's including a game where he did leave early. So he's been getting a ton of targets, at least 20 DraftKings points in his last 2 games. But he did have a big price jump. So last week he was 6,200 for some reason. Now he is up to 7,000, probably around where he should be priced. And I still think this is a little bit too cheap, but for the amount of volume he brings. But curious to hear the ownership. Honestly, if he's too high owned, I'll probably just go to a Julio or something like that. But give me Keenan Allen at 7,000. Probably more of a cash play for me.
Yeah, 17.7 owned, second wide receiver owned. So he's up there. He is definitely up there. And like I said, he's supposed to play today, assuming that he's healthy. He's in the area of 100%, as nobody is this time of the year. Yeah, he's definitely well owned, and he's been doing well. What a great situation! They're playing at home against Las Vegas. It's not a bad situation at all.
Yeah. For sure. All right, so I'm curious to hear the ownership of this play because another play I really like here. I think it has a ton of upside, and probably I'm guessing it's going to be the third highest owned play here. But it's Tyler Lockett, 6,800 versus Buffalo, 55-point game total, highest on the slate where the Seahawks are 3-point favorites. And I think this is a great run back option if you're doing a Josh Allen and a Diggs stack or a Josh Allen Diggs and a Beasley stack. I think you can definitely run it back here with Tyler Lockett at this price of 6,800. It's 1,000 cheaper than DK Metcalf, so I like that. Buffalo really struggles against the slot as well, so I think there's lots of upside in here for Lockett in a game that should score high, especially with them, missing a couple running backs. I think they will lean to the passing game a little bit more. So Lockett at 6,800, I think he has a ton of upside. We saw him get that 50-point game a couple weeks ago as well, so he has that ceiling. So Lockett is somebody I'm looking to in tournaments this week.
Yeah, he is the third owned wide receiver, 15.3%, just below Keenan and below Diggs. And yeah, that's $1,000 cheaper than DK Metcalf, who is the fourth most owned receiver at 15.3. So they're still fairly close, but I like your analysis of Lockett. I think that's an excellent situation for him.
Yeah, I like it. All right, so another guy that's 6,800 as well, and that is Will Fuller, 6,800 versus Jacksonville in a 50-point game total. And he's been really solid this year, averaging 17 DraftKings points per game. He's been really consistent, and that's something you can't usually say about Will Fuller. Will Fuller is usually one of those guys that will, on one week he'll get 30 DraftKings points, the next week he'll get 0. But this year he's been really solid, averaging 17 here. He has a high ceiling here and a good matchup against Jacksonville. Has scored in at least his last 5 games. So he's got a touchdown in his last 5 games there. And I really like the Watson and Fuller stack this week. Maybe a Watson, Fuller, and Cook stack as well. And I think it's going to be a little bit lower owned than the Buffalo stack there. So if you want to get a little bit different, I think the Fuller stack with Watson, I think could be a very good option here against Jacksonville.
9.7% owned, so he's down a little from the other ones that we've talked about so far. That's not bad. And like you said, Brandon Cooks is just below him at 9.5%. And like you said, $5,500. So Cooks is $1,300 cheaper. But that would be an interesting stack game, given the situation with Jacksonville with the young quarterback and how poorly they've been playing. So
Yeah.
I don't know, 9.7. That's not too bad. I think people are still kind of a little fuzzy about Fuller, but that's that's not a bad ownership. It's low enough, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So we touched on him a little bit. Brandon Cooks 5,500. I really like Brandon Cooks this week. I probably like him more than Will Fuller. Because he's what 1,300 cheaper than a Will Fuller, and he's been getting a ton of targets as of late. He started off the season slow, but he's been looking fantastic recently. 21 total targets in weeks 1 through 4, and since then 30 total targets in weeks 5 through 7. So he's getting a ton of targets, averaging 22.5 DraftKings points in the last 3 weeks. Fantastic matchup against Jacksonville, and I love the Watson Cook stack here.
That's an interesting one. Like I said, 9.5% owned, so just a little bit low Fuller. 1,300 points is a lot of points. If you can, get a decent situation with him, that's a lot of money to spend on some other players. So it's very tempting.
I like it. All right, so this is another play that I was kind of waiting to see if Stafford was going to play, and now that he's playing, I think Marvin Jones Jr. at 5,000. I really like this play here versus Minnesota. 52.5 point game total, where the Lions are 4-point underdogs, and Galladay's out, as we know, and just a great matchup here against this poor Minnesota secondary. He scored 9 points and 12 points with no Galladay in week 1 and 2. He had a pretty good game last week as well. I think he had like 2 touchdowns last week here, so should see a decent amount of targets. He's now going to be the #1 receiver in a absolute fantastic matchup. 5,100. I think it's a pretty solid price here.
Yeah, 8.3% owned. That's not a bad ownership. He's, of course, the news about Stafford has not too old. It was, I guess, was Friday, so maybe that ownership is increasing. But that's a good situation. 5,100. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I do too. All right, so if we need a pump play here, there's a couple I'm looking at, but Danny Amendola is pretty interesting at 3,700 going against Minnesota. And a pretty solid total, 52.5. And Minnesota has given up the 3rd most DraftKings points to opposing wide receivers. And, of course, like we mentioned, Kenny Galladay is out, so he should see an increase in targets. He did have 7 targets week 1 and week 2 when Kenny Galladay was not playing, so it'd be nice to get him in that 7-target range again here against one of the worst defenses in the league here in Minnesota. Just a fantastic matchup in a game that should score high. Fantastic price, 3,700. I think it's a pretty solid pump play here.
3% owned, very low, 3,700. Now, what do you think about the other Marvin? Marvin Hall is another option there in Detroit. He had a decent game last week, and he is 2.7% owned. So Amendola and him are very close together, and their salaries, actually Hall's salary is an extra $100 at 3,800. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's really tough to decide which one's going to do what, but I probably lean towards Amendola. I think he has the higher upside and the higher floor with the targets, but I think Marvin Hall has the the more ceiling. Maybe he can catch a touchdown or something. But it's a tough play to decide which one you want to go there.
Yeah, interesting.
They're like good the same to me.
Lowly percent owned, which is nice. Both of them are.
All right, so I do want to touch on this, and that is the Steelers wide receivers versus Dallas. You got Juju, 6,200. You got Claypool, 5,700. You got Deontay Johnson, 5,000. I think they're all in play here against this awful Dallas secondary. But what I really like here is Deontay Johnson at 5,000. Whenever he is healthy, he seems to be Roethlisberger's favorite target. The problem is he cannot stay healthy. It seems like the dude's made out of glass. If this guy can have a complete game, he has so much upside here, and he is the cheapest out of the three as well. And I think he's the number one option on the Steelers when he's healthy here. So if he can stay healthy today, I think he can have a really good game. It's just the dude gets hurt every single time.
It's horrible.
In Week 7, he did have 29 DraftKings points. He had 15 targets in Week 7 there. And I think he even got hurt in like the late fourth quarter as well. So the dude can stay healthy. If he can stay on the field, I'd love the matchup against Dallas, but it's just hard to trust him. So I think it's going to be low owned. I think it's more of a tournament play. If you want to take a shot, I think he has upside here.
Ironically, well, remember, it's the Dallas Cowboys they're playing. Just a reminder. He's actually like the sixth most owned receiver at 12%.
Really?
That is
Wow.
Deontay Johnson. Excuse me, I said he instead of Deontay Johnson. I know, again, it's the situation you're talking about. $5,000, when he's healthy, he's the number one target. Is this guy ready this week? Is he going to play the whole game? And Chase Claypool is at 8.7, not too far behind him. And Juju's not far behind him. So obviously they're both, all three of them are being strongly considered for obviously their talent, and they're playing the Dallas Cowboys. I'm worried about him, and I'm worried about Deontay Johnson's being injured, and Calvin Ridley. Those two guys, after this season is over, we need to think about these guys. And of course, they're both young players, but I mean, Ridley's getting hurt, and he just runs out of balance and gets hurt. There's a play a few weeks ago. He kind of slipped on the little mat or whatever it was, and he was out. I'm like, what the heck is going on? This is. Sure, it's worrisome for Atlanta, and of course, us fantasy people, it's very serious.
Yes, for sure.
Great opportunities for all three of those Pittsburgh receivers.
Yeah, especially today. But that ownership is a little high, but it's definitely understandable. The matchup's definitely there, and I will have some Johnson, maybe sprinkle with some Claypool as well.
He's a wild card. If Deontay goes down early, but you're ifing and butting it, on that, because when Deontay's there, and I don't have the stats in front of me, Chase definitely drops out of his situation. His situation where he goes really high is when Deontay's not playing.
That's very true.
In my analysis of looking at actual data, but just off the top of my head.
You're right. We're going to move on to tight ends. Were there any other wide receivers you want to throw out?
Yeah. Tim Patrick has been out for a while for Denver, and he's still questionable. It's an early game, so we're going to find out if Tim Patrick's going to play before we have to make our decisions. And ironically, I don't have any data on Patrick. There is no data in our system to show. So he probably is a fairly low-owned player. Of course, that may change if everybody knows he's healthy. And he did really do well before he got hurt. So he's a guy, I guess you could call him a punt, or what was the other thing? The
dumpster dive.
Dumpster dive. He could be a nice dumpster dive because he outperforms Judy. Now, Judy's an incredible talent. But this guy is really getting a lot of targets and a lot of catches when he's healthy. So he's a real dumpster dive that you may want to think about, assuming that he's going to play today. And like I said, we'll know because it's an early game. And Antonio Brown, I know he's a Sunday night game, so there's probably some slate that he's playing in. Probably not one I'm going to play. But he's a wild card as hell. I mean, what is this guy going to do in his first game? I get this funny feeling, especially Godwin's, has got his broken finger. He's coming back, missed a game. I don't know what he's going to have on his hand, the pain management. This guy, Antonio Brown, this could be a situation where the quarterback, he lives with Tom Brady.
Yep.
So the connection with Tom Brady, even last year when he played shortly with the New England Patriots, there's an intangible there that says perhaps Brady is going to target this guy a little more than you would think he would. And I don't know how you use him because you have to use him in particular slates, but he is another interesting character to consider.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited to see how they use Brown in this offense. Very, very talented player.
I think it's great for them because they've been having injuries, and Evans kind of been injured a little, and I don't know. I think Brown's a bet. Ironically, if Brown is really healthy and he's really ready to play, and maybe it'll take a week or two, he could be the best receiver on that team.
I agree.
That's all I have there.
Okay, yeah, I like Patrick a lot. If Patrick plays, I'm going to be really monitoring that because Patrick against Atlanta, probably Drew Lock's number one option. It's really close up there with Noah Fan, who we'll talk about. But yeah, Patrick 4,900. If he plays, I think is a really good option there against Atlanta.
4,800, not a bad number there.
Yep. All right, so moving into tight ends here. And it's going to start with Noah Fant, 4,600 versus Atlanta in a 50-point game total where the Falcons are 3.5 favorites. I love the matchup here against this Atlanta defense, and Fant is averaging 12.2 DraftKings points per week. averaging a little bit over 7 targets per week as well. I think is way too cheap here at 4,600, considering the upside of the matchup and considering the upside in general of Noah Fant here. So 4,600 is something I'm really looking at in a really good matchup.
Yeah, the third owned tight end for DFS, 13%. Above him is Waller and Kelsey, slightly higher percentages. Good situation. Like you said, I'm a little annoyed at Albert O kind of sneaking in there and stealing some tight end production.
Yes.
I don't know how to take that. I guess I shouldn't worry about another player on the team, even though he's a tight end. Albert O is at 2,800 salary and 1.4. I don't know how much, he steals stuff, so I'm not sure if he's worth a play because Fant's in front of him. I'm just annoyed. I guess I just want to say I'm annoyed at Albert O. And
no, I agree.
And Noah has a productive day.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Alberto had only 1 catch last week, but it was a touchdown. So he stole a touchdown. So there you go.
He stole a touchdown.
Yep. All right. Next play here, Evan Ingram, 4,300 versus Washington. A 42-point game total. Not a game I'm really excited about, but I think Evan Ingram's really cheap here. Washington has given up the second most points to opposing tight ends, so not really great at covering the tight end this year. Way too cheap of a price here for Ingram, who does have 54 targets on the year, averaging nearly 7 targets a week. And surprisingly, he has no touchdown receptions on the year. He had a rushing touchdown, but no touchdown receptions, which is pretty crazy. 54 targets, no touchdowns. Maybe this could be the week against this Washington defense, but I'm not overly excited about it, but he's a really cheap pump play here.
Yeah, that's a good one. He is 4% owned. He's getting down there. And Golden Tate, a wide receiver, third wide receiver for the Giants. I think the word is they're going to bench him this week because of him being an AH, which means asshole. And
yeah.
I don't know, I'm so annoyed at that guy. I don't know if you remember, early in the year, they had a game where they had to score to tie or to win. It was the last play of the game, and they threw about a 20-yard pass, a square into him, and he literally just shoved the defensive player, and then he dropped the ball anyway, and they got the flag. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Yeah. Last play of the game. It was past obvious that it was offensive interference. And the guy's just a jerk, in my opinion. He's always foaming it at the mouth, and he's always taunting people. He's just, I don't know. He's just a guy who it's hard to root for him. And now his antics have landed him on the bench, supposedly. But maybe that Ingram, even though it's a tight end receiver situation, but targets may go up because of that for Ingram.
Yeah, good point there for sure. Maybe Tate getting benched, maybe that helps him out a little bit, cleans him up a little bit there.
Hopefully so. I get annoyed at people. Sorry.
Understandable. But like you mentioned, Travis Kelce and Darren Waller are the highest projected owned tight ends here. I think they're fine plays. Kelce's always in play every single week. I think Waller's in play every single week, especially at 5,800. But this week I'm going to be more paying down at tight end. There's so much great plays at running back that are high priced. You got to find some salary savings somewhere, and it's definitely going to be at the tight end position for me. The other guy I want to talk about is Hawkinson at 5,100. So I wasn't going to play him if Stafford was not playing. So since Stafford's playing now, I think Hawkinson at 5,100 is a fairly solid play here. Going against Minnesota, really bad defense. They're ranked 25th against the tight end here, giving up a ton of DraftKings points to tight ends as well. Week 8, 13.5 DraftKings points. Week 7, 16.9. And I think, since they're missing Galladay here, I think Hawkinson's going to be probably Stafford's next best target there. So Hawkinson at 5,100, I really like as a tournament play.
I totally agree with you. 5,100. He's at 8.5% owned. He's the 5th most owned tight end. That's not surprising. 8.5%. That's not horrible. Good opportunity for him. He's been doing better and better, and the situation is definitely good for him. It's a very good situation for T.J. Hawkinson.
Yeah, I like that play a lot. I'll probably have a decent amount.
Yeah, let me write that down just a second. Okay, you can go on.
All right, so the last play I do want to touch on is another pump play for tight end, and that is Hunter Henry, 4,000 versus the Raiders, and a 50-point game total, 9.6 DraftKings points per week for Hunter Henry there, but only 1 touchdown this year for Hunter Henry. But he does get a solid amount of targets, 46 targets on the year, and he just seems way too cheap here at 4,000. I'm assuming he's going to be pretty popular just due to the price in general. Solid matchup against the Raiders. If I was to go down it for a tight end, I think this is a decent option here.
Yeah, he's 10% owned. He's the 4th most owned tight end this week. Yeah, we're just hoping he gets in the end zone a little bit more here in the second half of this season.
Yeah.
They with this incredible rookie, it's he's getting the targets. He just needs to get in the end zone. But yeah, 4,000 is a good price. 10%
I like
owned.
Was there any other tight end you wanted to throw out, or do you want to move on to defense?
I don't have anyone right now. That's where I'm sitting. I like Fant. I like Fant. I do like Fant. As you mentioned before, but he is high owned. I don't have a sneaky tight end this week. I had a few earlier in the year, and right now I haven't come up with one this week. Sometimes it's just not there. Well, it's probably there. I just haven't figured it out.
Yeah. All right. So we'll touch on defense a little bit here, and up top. I mean, the Steelers are 4,900, and I'm curious to hear the ownership because people are actually going to go out there and play the Steelers at almost a 5,000 price tag at defense, which is just it's honestly crazy. But what's the ownership of the Steelers? I just want to have a good laugh here.
13.5% owned, the second most owned defense. Guess who the first most owned defense is? I bet you won't get this. Think about it.
Is it Washington?
Nope, they're third.
It can't be the Giants?
No. It's against Jacksonville. It's Houston.
Really?
I think they think Houston. They're going to, with this young quarterback, I think people are sensing turnovers. $3,100, so it's not ultra low, but that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's not a bad look. Steelers defense at 5,000, just about. I'm not going to touch, especially on a slate where you do want to pay up and get your Dalvin Cooks, you want to pay up and get your McCaffreys, your Edmunds. So that's insane that they're even going to be 13% owned. If I was to go up top, though, the Washington football team defense 3,400, just a good matchup against the Giants. The price isn't bad. Giants, obviously one of the worst teams in the league. You mentioned that the Texans is pretty interesting going against a backup quarterback. 3,100 is not a bad look. It's just the problem is the Texans defense isn't really that great.
Yeah, have they done anything this year? I haven't looked at their numbers right off the top of my head, but
yeah, they're averaging 2.6 DraftKings points. So I mean, nothing great there.
But it's Jacksonville and it's a rookie quarterback, and I can see that. But I do like your point about Washington. Their price is only $300 more than Houston, and they have been putting some points up. So,
yep, they've been getting sacks, which are very important. Some turnovers as well. I think the Giants, on the flip side, the Giants at 2,700 going against the Washington football team offense. The game total's 42 points, and Washington's. The Giants at 2,700 is not a bad look there. How owned is the Giants defense?
9.1% owned. They're 5th, so they're up there. They're a lot less than the top 3, but they're a little bit up there. But
yeah, and then I'll throw one more out.
That's a heck of a price.
Yeah, it is. That's probably where I'll go if I was going to pay down a defense. I'll throw one more out. I guess I'll go with the Atlanta defense, 2,500 against the Denver Broncos. It's just another cheap option. Probably not going to have much here, but I think the matchup's okay. But yeah, the Atlanta defense is pretty bad, so won't be expecting too much there.
8.5% owned, just 2 down below the Giants.
Not bad. So yeah, I'll probably go with the Giants in most of my lineups. I think the Texans are interesting as well.
Well, the Dallas defense is only $2,000. Just kidding.
Going against Pittsburgh there?
I'll edit that out later. I wasn't.
Okay,
I wasn't saying I would do that. I was just joking.
No, I got you. But that's it for me. Anything else you want to talk about? Any questions or anything?
No, I caught those early. Let's see if we got the other questions. No, we didn't get one there. Wait a sec. What do I have here? Okay, we've got a question on a starter. It's Tim Patrick. Let's assume he's starting. John Brown for Buffalo or McCole.
If Patrick plays, Patrick for sure, 100%.
You play on that one? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then we have McCole Hardman. He rephrased it a little bit. Okay, we got another question from Clamped Ease. Jared Cook or Evan Ingram?
That's a tough one. Michael Thomas is coming back. Probably go Ingram. I think the matchup's great for Ingram as well.
Okay.
So I'd probably go Ingram there.
Now, an interesting question here, I was going to bring that up and forgot about it, is with Hilton out, I'm not 100% if he's out. I think he was doubtful, but he's probably going to be out. What do you think about Marcus Johnson for the Colts?
I mean, it's really hard. I mean, I don't think Rivers is the best quarterback there, but Marcus Johnson, he's got to be like 3,000 probably on DraftKings.
Yeah,
so
let me go look real quick.
He's 3,000.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh, and he's of course way low owned, 1.5% owned at 3,000. Let me look at his numbers really quickly. Against
I think
Detroit.
It's
I'm sorry.
I think it's interesting. He had 4 targets and 2 receptions against Detroit, but the matchup's not great.
Yeah.
Rivers isn't great, but you really don't need much at 3,000. I think it's okay, but I don't know how much upside it's going to have, honestly.
Well, against Detroit, he was in 62 snaps. He got 39 yards receiving, 4 targets, 2 catches, no touchdowns, 5 points. I don't know. Against Baltimore, I know Hilton is out, but Hilton's not the main guy. That's a tough one. That's a real, he had a great gig against Cincinnati in Week 6, but against Baltimore, I'd have to stay away from that. I just think it's too risky. Pittman's coming back. I don't know if you heard the story about Pittman and his leg. It sounded pretty scary a few weeks ago, but Pittman only is just coming back. I don't think he's going to do a lot for a couple more weeks, but he's a guy to look to here once that leg starts to get better and better. But yeah, it seems to me like I like Marcus Johnson, but I wouldn't play him. I wouldn't play him this week. I think it's just too risky. Let's see if we got anything else. I think that may be the last question here. If I don't click, yep, that's what we've got so far. Beautiful.
All right,
got a lot to think about on these lineups here in the next hour or so as I do other things. But I got to get some lineups in this week. These are some really good ones. I can't wait to try some of these out this week. Anything else?
I'm excited. Nope, really excited this week. Hopefully it's another pretty good week here and ready to win some money on this Sunday.
Well, you've nailed a lot of picks the last few weeks. It's been great. I remember the Indianapolis defense you called a few weeks ago. That worked out really well. They got a tough matchup this week, but sounds great. Mm-hmm. Well, good luck with everybody, all our listeners, and good luck, Brady. And let's have a great Sunday.
Sounds good.